Am I the asshole for always refusing to split the bill and only paying for my own order? I've been in the same friend group since secondary school, and despite everything, we've stayed close. Now, in our early 30s, we still make an effort to get together for birthdays, holidays, and random dinners. We've been through so much together, and these friends feel more like family. We're totally comfortable with each other, having shared all the highs, lows, and embarrassing moments. One thing everyone knows about me is that I don't drink. It's just not for me, and I also have some food restrictions, so I tend to order my own meal without joining the shared dishes everyone else loves. They're all about sharing, ordering tons of food to pass around. Years ago, a friend suggested I'd just get a separate bill, which worked perfectly. I order my simple, inexpensive meal while they split everything else, including drinks. Everyone seemed fine with it, and it became our norm. Last week, though, something happened that's made me question everything. My friend Lisa recently started dating someone named Brady. She's mentioned him a few times, and he sounded okay, maybe a bit outspoken, but I trusted her judgment. This weekend, Lisa brought Brady to one of our dinners for the first time. It was a casual meet-the-group thing, a tradition when someone new joins the friend circle. At the restaurant, the evening started as usual. Drinks were ordered, wine, cocktails, everything. The group quickly settled into its usual rhythm, joking around, ordering lots of food. Lisa and some others were already on their second round of cocktails, while others debated which bottle of wine to try next. It was the usual lively scene, with people eager to try everything and share it all around. Brady seemed to fit right in, grinning, joining the laughter, and even suggesting dishes like he'd been in the group for years. Brady seemed at home, ordering drinks and enthusiastically nodding when a fancy bottle of wine was picked. He ordered a steak, then chimed in with suggestions for more dishes to try. Meanwhile, I kept things simple, as always, with water and a single entree. I noticed him glancing my way occasionally, but I didn't think much of it. I figured he was just adjusting to the group dynamics, trying to find his place. When the bill arrived, the familiar routine began. Everyone reached for their wallets, laughing about who would cover what. I asked the server for my separate bill, as usual. My friends know this routine well, so I expected no issues. But as I was about to pay, Brady spoke up. "Hold on. Why aren't you paying your share?" At first I thought he was joking, so I laughed and explained, "Oh, I've always done it this way since I don't drink or eat from the shared plates. This way everyone only pays for what they ordered." I expected him to laugh it off, but he didn't. Instead, he looked at me with a serious expression. "That's ridiculous. You're part of the group, right? You should be paying your share of the table," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. The mood shifted immediately. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, and there was an uncomfortable silence. I glanced around, hoping someone would back me up or make a lighthearted comment to ease the tension, but everyone stayed silent. I felt a mix of shock and embarrassment. I tried to explain that it wasn't about avoiding paying. It was just that I only ordered my own meal. I've done it this way for years. But he seemed determined to label me as a freeloader. "It's been this way forever," I said, hoping it would remind everyone of the arrangement. But Brady just shook his head, calling me a cheapskate and selfish across the table. Each word felt harsh. I could feel my face heating up, hoping one of my friends would step in. But they just sat there, silent. Here I was in a group I'd been part of for years, being called out as if I'd done something wrong. Eventually, I just paid my bill and left. I couldn't stand the atmosphere any longer, with Brady glaring and my friends saying nothing. I didn't want to escalate things, but I felt humiliated. Walking out, I felt like I'd been judged for something that was never an issue before. Since then, I've been questioning everything. Have my friends secretly resented my separate bill all these years? Was Brady right? Or is he just someone who insists on his own version of fairness, no matter what? I feel like he crossed a line, but his words have stuck with me. Now I'm torn between sticking to my usual arrangement or changing to avoid another scene. So, am I the asshole for keeping my separate bill, or did Brady overstep? Update 1. A few days after that dinner, one of my friends called me. It was clear from her tone that the group had discussed what happened with Brady. She was friendly but cautious, like she didn't want to bring up the drama, but felt she had to. She invited me out to another group dinner, a smaller one this time. She emphasized that everyone wanted me there and that it would be a relaxed night, a peace offering of sorts. I hesitated, but eventually agreed. She didn't say if Brady would be there, though I assumed he would be, given his confidence at the last dinner. When I arrived, everyone was already there, chatting and laughing like the last dinner incident hadn't happened. It felt good to be back with them, but there was an unspoken tension. People seemed a bit on edge, likely wondering if there would be another confrontation. Not long after I sat down, Lisa and Brady arrived. He looked just as self-assured as before, smiling as if he'd somehow changed the group dynamic with his demands. He sat across from me, giving me an almost challenging look, but I smiled back, determined to stay calm. As the night went on, drinks and appetizers were ordered, and everyone got back into their usual groove. Brady, of course, dove into the menu, suggesting dishes and even pushing for a few pricier options. I noticed him watching me, likely waiting to see if I'd go through my usual routine of ordering separately. At one point, Brady leaned back, looked directly at me, and brought up the last dinner. He made a loud comment about how some people like to dump their share on others, instead of paying fairly. His words felt like a public call-out, and I could feel my face heating up. He asked if I'd be doing the same thing this time, still smirking like he was in control. But that night, I was done explaining myself. I didn't respond, I just looked at him, then turned back to the menu. As I looked through the options, an idea formed. If Brady was so insistent on splitting the bill, then I'd give him exactly what he wanted, so I decided to order like never before. Every time Brady suggested something, I nodded along and added my own recommendation. I picked the most extravagant items on the menu. Appetizers that could be meals, the largest steak, and drinks, even though I don't drink. I made sure to order fancy cocktails and desserts just to try them. Brady looked increasingly confused, as though he couldn't figure out what was happening. My friends seemed surprised, watching as I continued to pile on orders. Some raised their eyebrows, while a few chuckled under their breath. They were curious, maybe even amused, but no one questioned it. The meal turned into a true feast, with dishes filling the table and everyone laughing, sampling everything, and enjoying the energy. It was one of the best dinners we'd had in a while. So much food, so much laughter, and no one seemed tense anymore. When the bill finally came, the server set it down, and I quickly picked it up. Brady's smug expression faltered slightly as I looked it over. The bill was massive, easily one of the biggest we'd had. I caught his eye and announced that if he was so keen on splitting the bill, I was perfectly fine with it this time. The look on Brady's face was priceless. He glanced at the bill, his eyes widening as he realized the bulk of the charges were mine. He'd clearly expected me to stick to my usual modest meal, but I'd completely outdone everyone else. He started to protest, suggesting that maybe we shouldn't split the bill, but I cut him off. I reminded him that splitting equally was his idea, the very thing he'd insisted on at the last dinner. He'd said we were all part of the group and should pay fairly, so that's exactly what we'd do. Realization dawned on him as he looked around, hoping someone would back him up, but this time, no one did. A few friends even stifled laughs and gave me knowing looks. Brady had no choice but to go along, and we split the bill equally, just as he'd wanted. He looked dumbfounded as he pulled out his wallet, realizing he'd have to pay much more than he'd anticipated. As we left the restaurant, I could tell Brady was fuming, though he tried to hide it. I walked out feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction. Brady had insisted on fairness, and I'd shown him exactly what that meant. My friends seemed amused, some giving me nods or pats on the back as we said goodbye. The tension that had lingered since the last dinner felt like it had finally lifted. Update 2. The morning after that dinner, I woke up to several messages from an unknown number, which turned out to be Brady. It seemed the frustration he'd taken home hadn't faded overnight. His messages started by questioning my joke with the bill, asking why I'd ordered so much food only to split the check equally. He couldn't understand it, accusing me of embarrassing him in front of the group and calling it a childish stunt. He even claimed I'd made a fool out of him, as if the dinner was some grand scheme just to bring him down. It was surreal. He seemed blind to the irony of his words. Here was the guy who'd barged into our group and disrupted a perfectly fine arrangement, now upset because he finally had to face the consequences of his own demands. I couldn't help but laugh. After all, wasn't it him who insisted on fairness, saying we were all part of the group and needed to split evenly? I responded calmly, saying I'd just been hungry and reminded him that he'd been the one pushing for the equal share approach. I thought respecting his preferences was the fair thing to do. But Brady didn't want to hear it. He insisted I'd set him up, intentionally making him look bad in front of everyone by ordering more than usual. According to him, I was to blame for his paying more than he'd wanted, and he even suggested I owed him an apology. The thing was, I didn't feel bad at all. For years, I'd paid separately without complaint, always choosing affordable options and sticking to what worked for my budget and dietary needs. My friends had been completely fine with it. One of them had even suggested it long ago. But Brady chose to make it an issue, pushing the group to adopt his version of fairness. After getting exactly what he'd asked for, he was angry because it didn't go his way. The kicker was that Brady didn't stop there. After our exchange, I brushed it off, thinking he'd vented and moved on. But later, a friend told me that Brady had messaged her too, complaining about what happened. He'd been messaging others in the group, expressing his displeasure and suggesting that I wasn't a good fit for the dinners if I kept stirring up drama. It was absurd. This guy, who had only been to a couple of our gatherings, was now trying to get me excluded from my own friend group. So I decided to post in our group chat, the one without Brady, just for the core friends who'd known each other for years. I laid it all out, explaining how Brady had been texting me, accusing me of setting him up, and insisting I take responsibility for ordering more food than usual, as if it was some offense against him. It didn't take long for my friends to respond, and their reactions were equal parts amused and bewildered. Apparently, Brady had been messaging them too, spinning his story and calling me toxic for the group. He'd even suggested maybe I should skip the next few dinners. Our chat quickly filled with laughter and eye-roll emojis as friends shared screenshots of his messages. They thought it was ridiculous that he was trying to push me out of our group dinners. They all knew how I'd handled my own meals and bills for years without issue. We'd built an unspoken system that worked perfectly, and here was Brady, the newcomer, thinking he could dictate how we should handle things. Some joked that he should have paid a newbie tax for trying to play dinner dictator. They found it hilarious how he couldn't handle the embarrassment and was now deflecting his own discomfort onto me. They saw right through him. One friend even commented on how quickly he'd gone from trying to play the big shot to claiming victimhood the moment things backfired. We shared stories, recalling little moments from the dinner where he'd tried to take control or make comments about how we should split things. It was clear none of us took him seriously. My friends reassured me that he was being absurd, that he'd crossed a line by messaging everyone, and his attempt to cancel me from our dinners was out of touch. There was a strong sense of camaraderie, a reminder that we'd been through too much together to let one loud outsider disrupt our dynamic. By the end of it, we all agreed Brady's reaction said far more about him than it did about me. It was clear he wasn't cut out for our group if he couldn't handle something as simple as a dinner bill. And honestly, I felt a bit of satisfaction. Brady had tried to change things and ultimately embarrassed himself. Meanwhile, we were all still here, still laughing about it and planning our next dinner, one that he wouldn't be invited to. Commentary time. This story is a fantastic example of how long-standing dynamics can be disrupted by someone who doesn't quite understand or respect the established ways of a group. OP's friends had clearly created a system that worked for everyone, allowing OP to comfortably navigate their dietary choices and abstain from shared dishes and drinks. For years, this arrangement had been mutually agreed upon, with everyone knowing and respecting each other's boundaries. Then Brady enters the picture. His assumption that everyone should split the bill evenly, regardless of individual contributions or consumption, disregards the trust and compromise that's kept this friend group happy for so long. In an effort to assert his idea of fairness, he ends up imposing his expectations on a group dynamic that was already functioning well. Brady's approach shows a lack of awareness, both of his place as a newcomer and of how deeply rooted and close-knit this friend group is. His attempt to expose OP as a freeloader backfires hilariously when OP responds by ordering lavishly, forcing him to face the reality of his own demands. OP's calm but clever response shows that sometimes fairness isn't about treating everyone the same. It's about respecting established boundaries that accommodate everyone's needs. By following Brady's rule to the letter, OP brilliantly highlights why personal choice and flexibility have been essential for their group's happiness. The story's conclusion makes it clear that OP's friends support them fully, while Brady's behavior ultimately alienates him. What would you have done in OP's shoes? Have you ever had a new friend join a group and disrupt things with a rigid sense of fairness? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more stories about navigating friendships and boundaries.